go to the mobile app and check the right box for that. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hyde from CMU, who is here to talk about using an interactive avatar's facial expressiveness to increase persuasiveness and socialness. Take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So today I'm presenting work that I did with Elizabeth Carter, Sara, Kiesler, and Jessica Hodgins. So we ran a study to see how adults interact with an avatar that can exhibit different levels of facial expressiveness. In this talk, an avatar refers to a virtual representation of a person, and avatars are controlled by the people that they represent. So I'd like to start by showing you what our avatar looked like. So we tracked the facial motion of a Confederate to animate her avatar in real time. In this video, you can see the Confederate and her avatar. In our study, the participants and Confederate sat in separate rooms while conversing with one another. The Confederate and participant used a custom teleconferencing system. So the participants appeared as themselves through video, but the Confederate appeared as her avatar. We're interested in learning how the facial expressiveness of avatars can influence socialness and persuasiveness during conversation. So avatars are used in domains like entertainment, education, and therapy. I have some examples here. At the top, we have avatars from Miiverse, which is a service that users of Nintendo Wii U and 3DS can use to communicate with one another. Players create their own avatar and then use the avatar to communicate or to play games. At the bottom left, we have an example of a therapist using the virtual world Second Life to help her client practice for a job interview. In this scenario, the avatars help the therapist and client role play by making the situation more believable. At the bottom right, I have another example of people using avatars for therapy, except this time the therapist and client use the avatars to converse as themselves instead of for role playing. People can use the avatars to meet remotely for training purposes and to maintain anonymity. Avatars are useful in education and therapy because they can influence how people behave and think. When creating an avatar for education and therapy, we should consider what the avatar will look like and how it will behave. People respond well when avatars appear and act human-like. These behaviors could include nodding, blinking, and exhibiting emotional facial expressions. Studies have shown that people interpret the facial cues of animated characters similarly to how they interpret the facial cues of people. For avatars to be effective in the roles of educator and therapist, they may need to exhibit traits that are associated with these roles, such as warmth and respectfulness. Additionally, researchers have found that damping and exaggerating facial expressions influences people's perceptions of the character's personality traits, particularly extroversion. These are some sample stimuli from studies that looked at how damping and exaggerating facial expressions affected the intensity of the expression. Exaggerating the facial cues of avatars used in education and therapy could make these characters easier to understand and more engaging. Additionally, characters that exhibit exaggerated expressions are considered more extroverted than characters with more subdued expressions. Some studies in psychology and human-agent interaction have shown that personality can influence interactions. Researchers have found that extroverts and people who exhibit more dominant behaviors are more influential and persuasive than introverts and those with more submissive behaviors. Nass and colleagues found evidence that agents represented by text were more persuasive and preferred when the agent's level of extroversion was similar to participants. However, in another study, using an embodied agent, participants preferred the agents that exhibited complementary personalities to their own. The complementarity principle posits that people prefer and seek others who have complementary interaction styles, as this will result in a balance of power and less tension. It's unclear from these studies whether people will interact better with avatars that exhibit personalities that are similar or complementary to their own. So to investigate how facial motion might influence perceptions and interactions with an avatar, we ran a study in which participants spoke with a Confederate who appeared as an avatar with damped, unaltered, or exaggerated facial motion. Participants rated the avatar in extroversion, warmth, and competence. Participants also rated the avatar's humanness and eeriness. Additionally, we use behavioral measures to analyze their interactions with the avatar. We use 2D active appearance models to track the Confederate's motion and to animate her avatar. Active appearance models, which I'll refer to as AAMs, can capture subtle facial motion, eye gaze, and blinks. AAMs can also track in real time. On the left, you can see the AAM mesh overlaid on top of the video. The motion that's tracked by the AAM is used to animate the avatar. The distance that each of the mesh vertices move can be multiplied by values greater than 1 to exaggerate motion and values less than 1 to damp motion. So here's an example of the avatar animated with different amounts of facial motion. These motion levels are subtle, but they are noticeable, especially if you look at the avatar's mouth movements. We built a custom-designed telecommunication system to enable our participants to converse with a Confederate-controlled avatar. The participant and Confederate sat in different rooms. So to communicate, they used these black boxes, which contained cameras, microphones, and monitors. Unlike a traditional video conferencing system, we used beam splitters and placed the cameras at eye level so that participants and the Confederate could make eye contact with one another. Beam splitters are like one-way mirrors. A participant sees the reflection of the monitor, but the camera can see through the beam splitter. So when the participant looks at the beam splitter, they are actually looking right at the camera, thus permitting eye contact. Here's how the system works. The Confederate's camera would take video of the Confederate and send it to be processed. The processed video became the animation of the avatar, which was sent to the participant's monitor and reflected off the beam splitter for the participant to see. Similarly, the participant's video was sent to the experimenter's monitor and reflected off the beam splitter for the Confederate to see. Each participant had a single conversation with the Confederate via her avatar. The avatar displayed one of 3 motion levels during the conversation. We collected information about the participants to use as control variables, and this information included things like their age, gender, personality, and computer usage. The dependent variables were based on participants' behaviors and self-report ratings. We recorded and annotated the conversations to examine participant behavior, and we asked participants to complete surveys about the Confederate and the avatar animation at the end of the study. Today, I'll only be talking about a few of our dependent measures, including Confederate influence. Before I get to the results, I need to describe the task that participants completed with the Confederate and our measure for Confederate influence. So in this experiment, participants completed a modified desert survival problem with the Confederate, which I'll be calling the DSP. So the DSP is a team-building exercise that has been used to research group and social dynamics, including how people cooperate, trust, influence, and communicate with one another. This type of communication is also important in education and therapy. So for this study, participants were presented with a scenario, which I've excerpted here. You have just crash-landed in an unfamiliar desert. The helicopter you were in has completely burned. Miraculously, you and the other passenger have escaped uninjured. Before everything caught fire, you managed to salvage 9 items. So after reading the scenario, the participants ranked these 9 items in order of their importance for survival. We told participants that the goal was to match an expertly ranked list. After ranking the items, participants spoke with the Confederate to exchange ideas about their rankings. The Confederate appeared as her avatar and argued for a permutation of the participants' rankings. Participants were told that the Confederate was another participant. So the Confederate rankings were determined using this permutation for all of her conversations to maintain consistency. For example, if the participant ranked the flashlight first, then the Confederate's ranking of the flashlight was 5th. This method for determining Confederate rankings has also been used by Ray and colleagues. The Confederate was semi-scripted. For each item, the Confederate gave exactly 2 reasons for why the item should be ranked higher or lower. So for example, if the Confederate was arguing to rank the flashlight higher, she told participants that the flashlight was the only reliable nighttime signaling device and that you could use pieces of the flashlight, like the lens and reflector, to start a fire. Each reason was only stated once. After the conversation, participants re-ranked their items. So here is a short clip of one of the participants speaking with the Confederate who appeared as an exaggerated avatar. The Confederate saw video of the participant, and the participant saw the Confederate as an avatar. So I've included video of the Confederate so you can see how the avatar is animated with the Confederate's motion. The participant has a sheet of paper with her rankings on it, so when she looks down in the video, she's looking at that piece of paper. And in this clip, the Confederate gives the participant 2 reasons for why the plastic raincoat should be ranked lower.
And then raincoat, I had lower because I wasn't sure if maybe it would start like melting.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't thinking about like wearing it at all because you wouldn't. Well, I guess at night if you're cold.
I was worried that if you wore it or something, it might make you sweat more and lose water.
Oh yeah, get
because
dehydrated.
it's plastic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like I had said before, I was thinking more of like using it for some sort of shelter at night. So
that makes sense.
So to measure Confederate influence, we calculated Spearman's row, which is a rank-ordered correlation that measures the similarity between 2 rankings. We used the Confederates' ranking and the participants' final ranking to calculate Spearman's row. This measure quantifies how much participants changed their rankings to match that of the Confederates. Higher values of row indicate that the Confederate was more influential, and lower values of row indicate that the Confederate was less influential. So in total, we analyzed the data from 59 participants. They were all native English-speaking adults, and 35 of them were female. 41% of these participants voluntarily submitted comments, which we analyzed qualitatively. There were about 20 participants in each of the motion conditions. And in the interest of time, I'm only presenting some of our results, but please refer to our paper for more detailed analysis. So as expected, the perceptions of the Confederates' extroversion were positively related to facial motion magnitude. Participants rated the damped avatar as less extroverted than the unaltered and exaggerated avatars. And in this graph, the star indicates significance at alpha equals 0.05 or less. From prior research, we expected that the higher an avatar's extroversion and dominance, the more persuasive it would be. The exaggerated avatar was more persuasive than the unaltered avatar, but the damped avatar was also more persuasive than the unaltered avatar. This suggests that the damped and exaggerated motion captured participants' attention, making the Confederate more influential. The more attention that participants paid to the avatar, the less attention they spent thinking about their rankings. So we did not find a significant interaction between participants' personality and avatar facial motion magnitude. Participants also rated how human and eerie they found the avatar. Avatar facial motion magnitude did not influence participants' ratings of humanness and eeriness. However, 11 participants in the exaggerated condition wrote comments, and 10 of those 11 comments referred to discomfort with the avatar. So I have one here. The voice of the character was very good, and her responses were natural and well-timed. It was weird at times because it was so well-timed and casual, while her animation still lacked. The animation exists in the same space in my head as the Polar Express. Very human, but just slightly off enough to make me feel uncomfortable. 5 participants from the damped condition made comments, and 4 of the 5 of those comments were about the lifelikeness and realism of the avatar. Wow, the ability to capture the various extents of the smile was really impressive and really did convey a good sense of realism to the other person I was speaking to. So here's another participant who saw the damped avatar, and at the end of her conversation with the Confederate, she started talking about the lifelikeness of the animation.
I don't know if you can see what you look like.
I have no idea.
It's super cool. It's really cool.
I just came in and did an experiment, so.
It's really cool. It's interesting. You're like a total cartoon, and it's reacting to every little facial expression. Like your eye, like I can see your eyebrows. It's tripping me out, but okay.
So the comments submitted suggest that the damped avatar may be preferred over the exaggerated avatar. However, more research would be required to investigate this idea. Future work could examine how people respond to avatars that are animated with more natural movements by using different animation techniques. Additionally, to further investigate the possibility of avatar personality interacting with participants' personality, we could follow the procedure of prior studies which recruited participants with more extreme personalities. We'd also like to see how people interact with avatars using different tasks, particularly tasks that mimic the conversations that a therapist or educator may have. Longer conversations or more conversations over time would also enable us to investigate whether people behave differently as they become more familiar with the avatar. So finally, it would be interesting to see if people with social and communicative difficulties benefit from interacting with avatars. So our results suggest that the facial motion of interactive avatars does influence people's perceptions of extroversion and possibly naturalness. These results match what we found in prior perceptual studies. Additionally, we found the avatar facial motion can be adjusted to influence the Confederate's persuasiveness. When the avatar exhibited damped and exaggerated motion, participants changed their rankings to align with the Confederate's rankings more than when the avatar exhibited unaltered motion. And this suggests that when participants spoke with the damped and exaggerated avatars, they may have relied on heuristic processing. So with heuristic processing, participants would have spent more of their cognitive resources and attention on the way in which the avatar moved and less on what the avatar's arguments actually were. We want to improve avatars that are used in education and therapy because avatars may be particularly useful for people who have social and communicative difficulties. And one participant hinted at the avatar's appeal with this comment: "Great experience. I thought if more humans were like it, I might interact socially more." So I'd like to thank Disney Research, the NSF, and the NIH for funding this research, and I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please come up to the microphones that are awkwardly placed behind the post. And don't forget to tell us your name and affiliation.
Even more awkward running over here. Helena Mentis, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So that's exactly what I was wondering about, doing the comparison about also then different people that have a tendency to be more dampened versus more overly exaggerated, and whether or not that comparison would have, follow the same things that you found or might actually be different because it's a person?
Yeah, so we've done a perceptual study, so not an interactive study, but a perceptual study using an actress to investigate somebody who has a lot of motion and is more expressive. And we specifically told the actress to perform various emotions at high levels of intensity and low levels of intensity. And so what we found is the exaggerated motion was still considered like unnatural and eerie. But the damped motion was actually considered more natural than the unaltered motion in that sense. So I definitely believe that depending on who the person is, damping the motion may actually benefit the interaction. However, exaggerating the motion, we still get into this creepiness, and we may need to investigate further with these different animation techniques to see if we can exaggerate motion without getting into that creepy area. But it's difficult because when you are exaggerating facial motion, you are enabling the character, the avatar, to do things that are physically impossible.
Well, I have a question. So you're doing these distortions with an avatar. Could you do them with the source video itself?
So it's really hard. I think it is possible, but the problem is, okay, so in order to use a source video, you're going to have head motions like nodding and shaking your head, and that's really hard to capture unless somebody's wearing markers or some sort of device to capture rotation. So by showing that, you're also adding some unnaturalness, because now you're showing a video of a person who has other contraptions that they may be wearing during the conversation. So you'd have to sort of factor that in.